Hi there, Björn from Physio Innovation. Today's video is still about the knee. So you're looking at me from the front. It's a follow-up from a video I did from the side the other day. And I wanted to talk about factors that influence our movement from looking at us from the front here. So it's obviously an important factor taken into consideration. You have quite a lot of movement going on, the adduction and the abduction that influences, you could say, tensile, compressive and torsional forces going on in our tendons around our kneecap. So we've got some solutions that that we can do as bike fitters to try to minimize these movements. I wouldn't despair too much again, because if you look at world-class athletes, you would probably notice some that has got really weird movements, to be honest. You would see some even maybe touching the frame, and you can see even athletes running around in athletics, for example, with overpronation, and you think, whoa, how can they actually run so fast? And the same thing happens in cycling as well. So my idea is that if you don't have any issue, any sort of overuse injury, then I would be careful to change anything. So changing, for example, the cleats, the sidewards movement. It could be putting in a spacer just here, so from the crank to the pedal. Those are things we can do to adjust what we call Q factor in cycling. So Q factor is basically hip width, and this the size of your hip, obviously it affects how your knee is, the knee's motion during the cycling phase. So we have almost always the same type of Q factor width already delivered from factories. A little bit of difference between road cycling and mountain bike, and this is something we can affect or we can influence with the positioning of the cleats. So you can play with the sidewards movement, you can play with some of the rotational movement and positioning of your cleats. And again, you can put in additional spaces into between your crank and your pedal, so washers, and you can get further away, for example. This could help you to get your knees motion as straight as possible. From a biomechanical point of view, what you would like to have in a cycling pedaling motion is a straight knee as much as possible. So I'll try to demonstrate what I mean with a straight knee. So something like this looks quite okay. So we do have a little bit of slight movement going on always. We do have some of these rotational, and now I'm overdoing it on my right knee here. So this is what we call 8 movements. So these 8 movements, just for the sake of giving you an example, we see them often amplified once you get fatigued. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to find out again what type of rider I have in front of me. I try to find out, does he has or she has any weak muscle chains that will affect the knee motion, at least later on when the fatigue installs. So this I do as a physiotherapist by assessing muscle change, testing muscles and so on, see if I've got any imbalances, and also trying to see how the actual movement quality is outside the bike. So we've got some specific tests for this, and one example I could give you is, let's say somebody with Could be a footballer, an old footballer. I've played football as well for 10 years until I was 18 years old, and it's actually followed me a little bit personally on the bike since then. So I was a right-legged, I still am, kicking with the right leg. So I know for myself that I have a little bit of an imbalance still, and it's incredible how it can actually follow you through the years, but it does. And it's my right hip here, a little bit weaker than my left. So what can happen sometimes is that I start to float a little bit around here with my right. So just give you an example from myself. So what I'm doing here to assess this problem is that I train obviously my right side to get the power up. I try to focus on my right side also in strength and conditioning, strength training. That's just one given example. And another example from a maybe too low position, for example, something that I often see. A too low position will always change something around your hip. So if you don't feel comfortable coming up to the quite high knee position here, as I'm showing you just right now, what some riders tend to do is they go out with their knees. They go out simply with their knees, so they get a little bit away from that pinching sensation that can occur inside your hip if you're positioned too low. And a too high position when I come down to the lower part here, what can happen, something I've seen during the years, is that the rider falls kind of, the knee falls apart, so it's a big word to use, but the knee falls inwards at least. So here in the very straight leg phase, the knee kind of goes inwards towards the frame. And again, here I'm far stretched out, and it requires quite a lot of hip strength actually to withstand this position and to control the movement. So once I get really fatigued, then my knee starts going inwards. So it's a good example of how positioning can affect your knee motion, so the adduction and the abduction. These two taken together, what you want to try and do is that you want to minimize it so you get an efficient stroke as possible, and you don't lose any power going to the sides with your knee. You can also affect your knee to some extent with an insert in your shoes, and it can alleviate a little bit and help, but it's not I wouldn't say it's not a total game changer, because those movement flaws you would see still they will somewhat follow. Not an insert. It's not that an insert will help you magically like this, but it can give you a better feedback, a quicker feedback to your foot, and hence your brain. So you have you're faster to correct your knee, and you got a better sensation. Think of it like a ski boot. If you got a ski boot which is not really fast or not compressed enough, and you don't have that immediate feeling, well, maybe you don't feel so sure on the skis either. So it's one example I often give. So you want the immediate feedback, you want a quick feedback going through the many nerves you have in your foot up towards your brain. So you got the whole feedback system being, you can say, nourished as fast and as efficient as possible. That's why I would recommend inserts. Right, okay, so next on is the hip. See you in another video, another day. Have a good ride and enjoy.